Ethan walked slowly down the empty alien street, his boots making soft sounds on the dusty ground. The sky above was a strange color, like deep purple mixed with silver clouds. The air felt heavy and cold, as if the whole city had stopped breathing. He kept his head low because he knew humans were not always welcome here. His plan was simple: get supplies and leave before trouble found him. But trouble found him first at the corner near an old market stall. He saw movement, something was lying. In the shadow, it was a woman, not human. Her skin had a faint glow under the dim light, and her breathing was rough. One of her hands clutched her swollen belly, and the other pressed weakly against the ground. She looked like she had been walking for miles but had no strength left to go further. The sight made Ethan pause. He knew what this meant. She was going to give birth, and it was going to happen soon. He looked around, expecting someone from her kind to come and help, but no one did. A few aliens walked by, pretending not to see others, whispered to each other, pointing and shaking their heads. Ethan caught pieces of their words in their language, words like cursed and unclean. He felt something in his chest tighten. It was not just that she was hurt, it was that everyone had already decided she did not matter. He crouched down near her. She opened her eyes, and they were a deep gold color with a strange shimmer. She tried to speak, but her voice was too weak. She said something in her own tongue, then tried again in broken human language. Please not here, they will come. Ethan did not ask who they were. He could hear footsteps in the distance and the sharp sound of boots hitting stone. The woman tried to move, but pain bent her body and she gasped. Ethan reached for her arm, but she pulled back at first. Her eyes were full of fear, like she was not sure if he was an enemy or a friend. But then another wave of pain hit her, and she let him take her hand. He felt her grip tighten hard enough to hurt. She whispered a name, but he could not tell if it was her name or someone else's. Maybe the father of the child, or maybe a warning. Ethan looked over his shoulder. The sound of boots was getting louder. A voice shouted something he could not understand, but the tone was sharp, like an order. He did not think for long. He slid one arm under her legs and the other around her back, lifting her up. She was lighter than he expected, but her body trembled with every step he moved quickly through the narrow streets. His eyes scanned for a safe place. He could hear the guards calling out, and the sound echoed between the walls. The woman rested her head against his chest. Her breathing came in short bursts, and he could feel her heartbeat racing against his arm. She whispered again, saying they will kill if the baby is born alive. Ethan felt a cold weight drop in his stomach. He had no idea why anyone would want to harm a newborn, but he did not need to understand to know she was telling the truth. The streets twisted and turned until he reached a small alley hidden behind a row of storage crates. He slipped inside, pressing his back to the wall and holding her close until the sounds of boots faded. A little he knew he could not stay here for long. His hideout was still a few minutes away, and he had to move before they circled back. As he stepped out of the alley, he noticed her eyes closing again. Her face was pale. Her skin glowed, dimming like a fading light. He spoke softly, "Stay awake, we are almost there." She made a soft sound in reply, but did not open her eyes. He could feel her slipping away. Finally, he reached a rusted metal door half hidden behind a stack of broken machinery. He kicked it open with his foot and stepped inside. The room was dark and smelled of old oil and dust, but it was safe for now. He set her down gently on a thin mattress in the corner. Her breathing was uneven, her body shaking with every contraction. He pulled out his small med kit, but it had almost nothing for childbirth. Only some clean cloth water and a basic pain patch. Ethan sat beside her, feeling the heat from her skin. She opened her eyes again for a moment and whispered "thank you" before another wave of pain made her grip the blanket tight. He could hear faint noises outside again, voices moving closer. He cursed under his breath, though no sound left his lips. She looked at him with eyes that were now glassy with tears. "Please," she said, "if I die, save my baby." The words felt like ice sliding into his bones. He had never delivered a child before. never even been near something like this. But as he looked at her shaking body and the life she carried, he knew he could not walk away then. The footsteps outside stopped right near the door. The air in the room turned heavy. Ethan reached for the old blaster hidden under the mattress. The woman's breathing quickened. Her eyes were fixed on the door as a shadow fell across it. The silence broke with 3 slow, hard knocks that made the thin metal shake. Ethan froze as the 3 knocks echoed through the small room. The sound was slow and deliberate, as if the one outside knew exactly who was inside. The woman's hand clutched the blanket tighter, her golden eyes wide with fear. Ethan's mind raced. He could try to hide her, but she was too weak to move, and the child would not wait much longer. He stepped quietly toward the door, pressing his ear to the cold metal. A faint voice spoke in the alien tongue, the words heavy with authority. "Human, open this door." He glanced back at her. She shook her head violently, mouthing the word no. Her breath was shallow, and each contraction twisted her body. Ethan decided he could not let them in. Not now. He stayed silent, hoping they might think the place was empty. But then the knocking turned into pounding, and the thin door rattled against its hinges. Dust fell from the ceiling, and his blaster felt heavier in his hands. He aimed it toward the door, ready for anything. The pounding stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Ethan counted each heartbeat in his chest, wondering if they had left. Then a sudden scraping sound came from the sidewall, metal against stone, like someone dragging a blade slowly. He moved toward the sound, keeping his weapon ready. A small patch of wall slid open, and a cloaked figure stepped inside. The figure lowered the hood, revealing the lined face of an older alien woman. Her eyes were sharp, but not unkind. She raised both hands, showing she carried no weapon. "I am a midwife," she said in broken human language. "I can help if you wish." Ethan hesitated. His instincts told him to be careful. She could be a spy sent to finish what the guards had started. But the woman on the mattress cried out again in pain, and Ethan knew there was no time for suspicion. He stepped aside, letting the cloaked woman approach. The midwife knelt beside the alien mother, placing a warm hand on her belly. She listened for a moment, then nodded. "The child is coming very soon." Ethan moved to the window, peeking through a crack. The guards were still nearby, their shadows long in the fading light. They spoke in low tones, scanning the street as if they were sure their target was close. The midwife worked quickly, laying out clean cloth and a small pouch of herbs. The air in the room filled with a strange scent, sharp yet calming. The alien mother's breathing slowed a little, though pain still bent her body. "What do they want with her?" Ethan asked quietly. The midwife did not look up. "Some say the child is dangerous," she said, her kind fears what they do not understand. "This child may not be fully one of us." Ethan felt his chest tighten. The thought of a newborn being hunted was something he could not accept. The midwife's hands were steady as she prepared for the birth, but her eyes carried a weight that told him she had seen too much of this before. The alien mother gripped Ethan's hand. Her voice was faint but urgent. "Promise me," she whispered. "Promise you will take the baby if I cannot." Ethan wanted to argue, tell her she would live, but the words caught in his throat. He squeezed her hand instead, letting her know without speaking. A sudden noise outside made him glance toward the door. Shadows moved quickly across the crack under it, and the sound of boots drew closer. The midwife worked faster. The contractions were coming one after another now, and the alien mother's cries grew sharper. Ethan stood near the door, blaster in hand, ready to hold them off if they tried to enter. The midwife spoke softly to the mother, guiding her through each breath. The scent from the herbs thickened in the room, making the air feel warm and heavy. Ethan's grip tightened on his weapon as the boots stopped directly outside. The metal handle of the door rattled once, twice, then went still. A voice spoke in the alien tongue, low but threatening. "We know you are inside, human. Give her to us, and we may let you live." Ethan said nothing. His eyes met the midwife's, and she shook her head, slightly urging him to stay quiet. The alien mother let out a final cry, and the midwife His hands caught the small, fragile form of the newborn. The child was silent. For a heartbeat, then released a soft sound almost like a hum. A faint glow pulsed under its skin, marking it as something different. The midwife wrapped the baby in cloth, quickly tucking it close to the mother. The glow dimmed slightly as the infant nestled against her chest. Ethan felt a rush of relief, but it was cut short when the door shook again, harder this time. The frame groaned under the force, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The guards were not going to wait much longer. The midwife looked at Ethan with urgency. "There is a way out," she said. "A tunnel under the floor. It leads to the old water passage. Take them and go now. I will hold them here." Ethan hesitated. Leaving someone behind did not sit right with him, but the woman on the mattress looked at him with pleading eyes, and he knew the choice had already been made. He knelt, lifting her gently with the baby secured in her arms. The midwife moved aside a loose panel on the floor, revealing a dark, narrow passage. The smell of damp stone rose from it. Ethan climbed down carefully, his boots splashing in shallow water. The panel closed above him, plunging them into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the child against its mother's chest, and the echo of the pounding above followed them as they began to move deeper into the unknown. The air inside the tunnel was thick and damp, and every sound seemed louder in the darkness. Ethan moved slowly, one hand supporting the alien mother while the other guided them along the narrow stone path. The shallow water at their feet rippled with each step, and the faint glow from the newborn's skin cast strange shadows on the walls. The mother's breathing was heavy and uneven, her strength fading with every moment, but she held the baby close as if nothing could take it from her. Ethan kept his voice low, trying to reassure her. "We are almost safe." He was not sure if that was true, but he needed her to believe it. The tunnel curved sharply, forcing them to squeeze through a section where the roof dipped so low Ethan had to crouch. The smell of the damp stone mixed with the faint scent of the herbs the midwife had used earlier, making the space feel almost unreal behind them. The muffled pounding on the door faded, replaced by faint echoes of shouting. Ethan knew it would not be long before the guards found the hidden passage. The waterway was old, and crumbling pieces of stone jutted from the walls and roof like jagged teeth. He moved carefully to avoid slipping, but the cold water was numbing his legs, making every step slower. The alien mother spoke softly in her own tongue, her voice weak but steady. Ethan could not understand the words, but the tone was gentle, almost like a lullaby meant to keep the baby calm. The child made a soft humming sound. In return, the glow under its skin pulsing gently in rhythm with its tiny breaths. Ethan glanced at it and felt something stir in his chest, a strange mix of wonder and fear. They reached a fork in the tunnel. Two paths stretched ahead, one narrower and darker, the other wider but filled with deeper water. Ethan hesitated, trying to remember the old maps he had seen once when trading in the city. The narrower tunnel might lead to the outskirts quicker, but it could also be a dead end. The wider one was slower, but safer from sudden collapse. He listened for sounds from behind, hearing only the distant drip of water. Then, faintly, he thought he caught an echo of boots splashing far away. Chose the narrow path, guiding them into the tighter space. The walls here were so close his shoulders brushed them, and the glow from the baby reflected off the wet stone, giving everything an eerie blue light. The mother stumbled once, almost falling, but Ethan caught her just in time. He could feel how light she had become. Her body weakened by the effort of giving birth and by the long hours of fear and running. Tunnels sloped downward, and the sound of rushing water grew louder. Ethan felt the ground shake slightly under his feet. The air became cooler, and a faint breeze touched his face ahead. The passage opened into a small underground chamber, where water spilled from a crack in the wall, forming a shallow stream. The sound masked their movements, making it harder for anyone behind to track them. Ethan let the mother rest on a dry ledge while he scanned the chamber for another exit. He spotted a low opening, partly hidden by the stream's flow. It was just big enough for them to crawl through. He helped her to her feet, and together they waded toward it. The cold water made her gasp, but she held the baby high above it, keeping the child dry. The glow under its skin seemed brighter here, reflecting in the ripples as they reached the opening. Ethan heard a new sound from behind the echo of voices. Had returned clearer now, and mixed with the metallic clink of weapons, he knew the guards were closer than ever. The mother's eyes met his, and in them he saw no fear, only a quiet determination. She was ready to keep moving no matter the cost. They crawled through the narrow opening, water dripping down from above. The stones scraped against Ethan's arms and back, and the baby let out a small cry, quickly soothed by the mother's touch on the other side. The tunnel rose upward, and the air became fresher, carrying faint hints of the world outside. Ethan felt his heart beat faster, knowing they were close to escaping the set. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture. That lives has the luxury. And leaves a will long last. To me, my lolly sound. My lolly/carry celeb became freshly celeb. My lies place. I can, he pled sound. My side, we sound, their solid day. By my mad, you will lay sad. By my sow says, by my said. By my end, but I make it to be deaded. Kikai non sate glisk, it could be keska, they resi kik kaisa let's pan, they kapakad I read the kamiski, it's this kai. Darkness, but just as they began the climb, a shadow moved at the far end of the passage. A figure stepped into view, blocking the faint light ahead. It was not one of the guards. It was a tall alien man with dark eyes and a long coat that brushed the tunnel floor. He held no weapon in his hands, but his presence filled the space with quiet power. The mother froze, whispering something in her own language. Her grip on the baby tightened, and her glow dimmed slightly. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between her and the stranger. The man's gaze moved from Ethan to the child, then back again, and a slow, deliberate smile formed on his face. He spoke in a calm, deep voice. You carry something that does not belong to you, human. Ethan tightened his stance, ready for whatever might come. The tunnel seemed to hold its breath, the sound of the stream behind them fading into the stillness. The man took a single step closer, his eyes never leaving the glow of the newborn, and in that moment, Ethan knew this was not over, not even close. The stranger stood blocking the narrow exit, his dark coat brushing the wet stone floor. The glow from the newborn reflected in his eyes, giving them an unsettling shine. The alien mother whispered again in her language, her voice trembling, but her gaze locked on him. Ethan kept his blaster low, but ready, unsure if firing in the tunnel would collapse the walls. The man tilted his head, studying Ethan with a slow, deliberate curiosity, as if weighing whether to strike or speak. You should hand the child to me, human, he said, in a voice that carried no anger, yet no warmth. This is not your fight, and it will not end well for you. Ethan did not move. He could feel the mother's hand gripping his coat as she pulled herself closer to him, her body weak, but her will unshaken. The baby gave a soft hum, and its glow pulsed, brighter, lighting the narrow space more clearly. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. He stepped forward with calm precision, each movement slow, as though he knew there was no need to rush. Ethan's mind raced. He could not fight here, not with the mother in such fragile condition and the baby in his arms. The sound of boots splashing in the distance reminded him the guards were still coming. Time was slipping away, and the stranger seemed to know it. Ethan spoke in a low voice. Who are you? The man paused as if deciding whether to answer. Then he said, I am someone who understands what that child is, and why it will never be safe among either of our worlds. The words struck Ethan hard, because they carried a truth he did not want to think about. The mother shook her head fiercely. She spoke to the man in her tongue, her voice rising with urgency. The man replied in the same language, his tone sharp and commanding. The tension in the tunnel tightened. Like a rope pulled to breaking, Ethan shifted his weight slightly, keeping the blaster steady on the stranger. The man noticed and let out a short breath that might have been amusement. "You are brave, human, but bravery will not change what is coming." He glanced down the tunnel toward the echoing footsteps, then he looked back at Ethan and the mother and said, "Follow me if you want a chance to keep the child alive." Then hesitated, every instinct telling him not to trust the stranger, but the guards were closing in, and there was no clear path forward. He looked at the mother. Her golden eyes were locked on his, and in them he saw a silent plea, not for herself, but for the life she held. That was enough. He gave a small nod. The man stepped aside, revealing a narrow side passage, hidden in shadow, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. They moved quickly, the stranger leading without looking back. The passage twisted sharply, then sloped upward. The air grew fresher with each step, and faint light filtered from above. The sound of the guards faded, replaced by the distant rush of wind. Ethan felt his muscles ache from carrying the mother, but he did not slow. The baby's glow flickered, now weaker than before, and it made his chest tighten with worry. Finally, they emerged into a cavern high above the city. A wide crack in the stone wall opened to the outside where a cold night breeze swept in, carrying the scent of rain below. The city lights glimmered faint, and far away the stranger turned to face them. "This place is hidden from their patrols, but not for long. You must keep moving before dawn." Ethan asked where they could go, but the man only shook his head. "That is not for me to decide." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There are people beyond the ridge who will help you tell them." Kale sent youth mother's eyes widened at the name. She spoke softly to Ethan, explaining that Kale was once part of the ruling guard, but had vanished years ago, accused of betraying his kind, if this was true. Then his help was both dangerous and valuable. Kale reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal disc, pressing it into Ethan's hand. "It will open the path beyond the ridge. Keep it safe." He glanced at the baby again, his expression unreadable. Before he turned toward the shadows, Ethan called after him, "Why help us?" Kale paused without turning. "Because some things are worth more than loyalty to a broken order." Then he was gone, swallowed by the dark tunnels. The wind outside the cavern carried a hint of rain, and the sky beyond the crack was heavy with clouds. Ethan looked down at the mother. She was pale, her breathing shallow, but she held the baby close, as if drawing strength from its faint glow. He knew they had only hours before the city sent more hunters. He adjusted his grip on her and stepped toward the narrow ledge leading away from the cavern. The path was dangerous, but it was the only way forward, and he had no intention of stopping. Now the wind hit Ethan hard as soon as he stepped onto the narrow ledge, carrying with it the sharp chill of the high night air. The alien mother clung to him, her arms wrapped protectively around the newborn, whose glow flickered weakly against the darkness. The city lay far below, its lights dim under the heavy clouds, while above the ridge jagged rock formations rose like silent watchers. The path was uneven and narrow, with steep drops on both sides and the sound of the wind roaring through. The gaps made every step feel more dangerous. Ethan moved carefully, planting each foot with precision. The stones were slick from the damp air, and small fragments crumbled under his weight. The mother kept her eyes forward, her face pale but determined. The baby made soft humming sounds that seemed quieter now, as if conserving its strength. Ethan could feel the tension in her body. The way she held the child close, not just for warmth, but as if shielding it from the very world far behind them. Faint lights moved in the darkness, guards searching. He could not see their faces, but the slow, steady way the lights advanced told him they were following the trail. He quickened his pace, though every step carried the risk of slipping. The wind shifted, bringing with it the faint metallic clink of weapons and the low murmur of alien voices carried from far below. The sound made the hair on his neck stand up. The ridge curved sharply ahead, and Ethan spotted a narrow stone bridge connecting to another section of the cliffs. It was barely wide enough for one person and looked worn by time and weather. He stopped for a moment, considering if it could hold their weight. The mother's grip on his coat tightened, as if sensing his hesitation. "We have to try," he said, his voice low and steady. She gave a single nod. They stepped onto the bridge. The rock beneath them groaned softly under the strain. The wind funneled through the gap on either side, making the bridge sway slightly. The baby's glow reflected off the wet stone, casting strange shapes in the darkness. Ethan kept his focus forward, refusing to look at the drop below. When they reached the middle, a sudden sound cracked through the night. A stone somewhere above loosened and fell, striking the bridge and making it shudder violently. The mother gasped, but kept her balance as Ethan pushed them forward faster until they reached the other side. Once across, he guided them into a small hollow in the cliff face, sheltered from the wind. They rested for a moment, the mother leaning against the stone wall as she adjusted the baby's wrap. Ethan peered back across the bridge. The faint lights of the guards were closer now. He estimated they had less than an hour before they would reach this point, and there was still the ridge to cross from. The hollow, a narrow upward trail wound between the rocks, leading toward the crest of the ridge. Ethan took the lead, his legs aching from the climb. The air grew colder, the wind sharper. But with every step upward, the stars began to appear through breaks in the clouds. The mother stumbled once, and Ethan caught her, steadying her with one arm while keeping his other free for balance. The baby's glow pulsed faintly in rhythm with their movements, a small light in the vast darkness. At the top of the ridge, the view opened wide. On the far side, a valley stretched into the distance, its floor covered in dark forest and rolling mist. Beyond that, faint lights marked the edge of another settlement. Perhaps the place Cale had spoken of. The sight brought a small surge of hope, but it was cut short by movement along the path ahead. A group of figures stood blocking the way, their silhouettes tall and unmoving against the pale glow of the clouds. Ethan slowed, scanning for another route, but the ridge here was too narrow to go around. The figure stepped forward, and the faint glint of armor confirmed they were not simple travelers. The mother shifted uncomfortably, and the baby let out a soft whimper. The leader of the group spoke in the alien tongue, the words sharp and commanding. Ethan could not understand, but the tone made it clear they wanted him to stop. He stood his ground, his eyes darting to the sides, searching for anything he could use as cover or advantage. The leader took another step forward and raised a long spear, its tip catching the faint starlight. The mother whispered something too. Ethan, in her language, her voice urgent and fearful. He understood the meaning without knowing the words. "They will not let us pass." Ethan tightened his grip on the blaster, though he knew firing might bring more trouble. The guards behind would soon catch up, and the ones ahead left no path forward. The leader of the group pointed the spear toward the baby and said something that made the mother's eyes fill with tears. Ethan stepped in front of her, blocking the line of sight. The wind howled around them, carrying the sound of boots from both directions. Closing in, Ethan stood still, the cold wind pressing against his face as the group ahead formed a wall of dark silhouettes. The alien mother tightened her hold on the baby and stepped back slightly, her golden eyes never leaving the leader who held the long spear. The glow from the child was faint now, but enough to catch the sharp glint of the spear tip. The leader spoke again in the alien tongue, the words low and dangerous, and though Ethan could not understand, he could feel the weight of the threat behind them. The sound of boots grew louder, echoing against the stone path. The guards were close enough now that their lights flickered through the darkness. The air between the two groups seemed to vibrate with tension. Ethan felt the ridge beneath his boots as a narrow and treacherous strip with no room for mistakes. He knew if he hesitated too long, they would be trapped between the two forces, and there would be no way out. The leader of the blocking group stepped forward, lowering the spear toward the child. Ethan raised his blaster, aiming it squarely at the alien's chest. His voice was steady, though the wind tore at every word. "I will not let you take them." The alien paused, studying him with eyes that reflected both calculation and something like amusement. He spoke again in his tongue, and two of his men moved to the side as if preparing to circle around Ethan's heart pounded. He needed to act fast. He turned his head slightly toward the mother, speaking low and urgent. "When I move, you run past them to the right. The path is narrow, but it drops down to the forest." She nodded once, her face set with determination. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a faint hum, as if sensing what was coming without another word. Ethan shifted his stance and fired a single shot at the ground near the leader. The blast echoed across the ridge, throwing sparks and shards of rock into the air. The sudden noise and flash made the front line flinch, just enough for Ethan to charge forward. He slammed his shoulder into the nearest alien, sending him staggering to the side. The mother darted to the right, slipping through the narrow gap Ethan had created. Shouts erupted in the alien tongue as the group tried to close ranks. Ethan swung the butt of his blaster into another attacker, knocking him back. He pushed forward, using the chaos to reach the mother, who was already halfway down the sloping side path. The drop was steep and lined with loose rock, but it was their only chance. They slid down the slope, the wind whipping around them. The sounds of pursuit followed quickly, the ridge fighters and the guards behind now both converging on their position. The mother stumbled once on the loose stones, but Ethan caught her. Before she could fall, the baby let out a louder hum, now the glow under its skin pulsing more brightly, as if feeding on the tension around them. Slope leveled out into a narrow trail, hugging the side of the ridge. The forest lay ahead, dark and heavy with mist. Ethan knew if they reached the trees, they might lose their pursuers, but the trail here was open and exposed. He urged the mother forward, his own legs burning from the descent. The shouts grew louder as the first of the aliens reached the top of the slope above them. An arrow struck the ground near Ethan's feet, sending a spray of dirt into the air. He glanced back, seeing one of the ridge fighters lowering a bow, already reaching for another arrow. He fired a quick shot, forcing the archer to duck, but the delay cost him precious seconds. The mother pushed forward, clutching the baby to her chest, and task. Ethan followed close behind. They reached the edge of the forest just as the glow from the baby began to fade again. The trees closed in around them, their branches forming a tangled roof that blocked most of the moonlight. The ground here was soft and uneven, muffling their footsteps, but also making it harder to move quickly. Ethan led them deeper into the shadows, weaving between thick trunks and low-hanging limbs. The sounds of pursuit grew muffled, but did not disappear. The aliens were still coming, their voices now a mix of frustration and determination. Ethan slowed slightly, listening for any sign of an ambush ahead. The forest was silent, except for the rustle of leaves in the wind. The mother's breathing was heavy, but she kept moving, her eyes fixed on the faint path. Winding deeper into the woods, they came to a small clearing where a fallen tree blocked the path. Ethan helped the mother over. It then paused, scanning the darkness. The air here felt different, colder, as if something unseen was watching. The baby stirred again, its glow faint but steady, and Ethan realized the sound of pursuit had stopped completely. He exchanged a quick glance with the mother, and they both knew this silence was not safety, but something else waiting in the dark. Thawne stood in the clearing, his breath clouding in the cold air. The alien mother held the baby close, its faint glow, the only light in the shadowed forest. The silence pressed down on them, heavier than the wind on the ridge. He scanned the trees slowly, every muscle tense. He had the feeling they were not alone, and that whatever was out there was not one of the guards. A faint movement caught his eye between two thick trunks. A tall figure stepped forward, covered in layers of dark fabric that blended with the night. The face was hidden behind a mask shaped from bone, with two narrow slits for eyes. The figure did not speak, but the air seemed to grow colder around it. The mother stiffened, whispering something in her language, her voice low and urgent. Ethan understood only that she knew who this was, and she was afraid. The masked figure raised one hand, slowly pointing toward the Baby, the gesture was calm, but carried a strange weight, as if it was not a request, but an inevitable command. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between them. His blaster was heavy in his hand, but he did not raise it yet. The figure tilted its head, studying him for a moment before speaking in a deep voice that seemed to echo inside the trees. That child carries the mark of the crossing. It does not belong to this world or yours. Ethan kept his voice steady. The child belongs to her, and use a long last time to her, and I promise to protect them. The masked figure let out a slow breath, then stepped closer. The forest seemed to shift around them, branches swaying, though there was no wind. The figure's words came again, heavy and certain. If you keep it, both your kind and hers will hunt you until the stars burn out. Ethan did not move. His promise to the mother was stronger than fear, stronger even than the truth in the figure's words. The baby let out a soft hum, and its glow brightened, filling the clearing. With a pale light, the figure stopped mid-step, as if sensing something new. The mother's eyes widened in recognition. She spoke quickly to the figure, her voice filled with both desperation and hope. Ethan could not follow the words, but the tone was clear. She was begging for mercy. The figure listened in silence, then slowly lowered its hand. For a moment, Ethan thought it was over, but then the sound of boots and armor returned from beyond the trees. The guards had found them and were closing in fast. The masked figure turned toward the sound, and Ethan realized they had only seconds before being surrounded. The figure looked back at him and the mother and spoke one final sentence. Go east until the river turns black. Then it stepped into the shadows and vanished as if it had never been there. Ethan wasted no time. He helped the mother through the far side of the clearing, moving as quickly as her weak legs would allow. The glow from the baby guided their steps, weaving through the tangled forest floor. The sound of pursuit grew closer, but the thick trees slowed the guards more than it slowed them. Ethan pushed on, his heart pounding with every step. The forest began to thin, and the air grew damper ahead. He heard the rush of water. They broke through the last line of trees to find a wide river cutting through the valley. Its surface shone faintly under the cloudy sky. The water looked deep and cold. The mother hesitated, but Ethan stepped into the shallows, supporting her as the current pulled at their legs. The baby stayed dry in her arms, its glow reflecting off the water like a small star halfway across the river. The first of the guards burst from the trees, shouting in their tongue. Arrows splashed into the water around them, but none found their mark. Ethan pushed harder, feeling the stones shift under his feet until they reached the far bank. He pulled the mother up the muddy slope into the cover of tall grass. The shouts behind them grew faint as the river's current carried their sound away. They followed the river downstream as the night began to fade into the first gray light of dawn. The water darkened slowly until it looked almost black, just as the masked figure had said in the distance. A cluster of low shelters appeared hidden among the reeds. Figures emerged from them, their shapes hunched and cautious, but their eyes warm with recognition. One stepped forward, holding out a hand to the mother and speaking softly in her tongue. She nodded in relief, and tears filled her eyes. Ethan felt the weight in his chest ease for the first time since finding her on the street. He watched as the strangers led her and the baby toward the shelters. Their movements were gentle, their voices low. The glow under the child's skin pulsed softly now, steady and calm. The mother looked back at Ethan for a moment, and in her gaze he saw gratitude deeper than words. He knew he could not stay. The more distance he put between himself and the child, the safer they would be. He turned away from the shelters and started back along the river. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and the promise of a new day behind him. He did not know where the path would lead, but he knew the choice he had made would stay with him for the rest of his life. Far behind in the waking city, the guards would speak of the human who defied them, the one who carried the cursed child into the night. Ethan would not hear those words, but somewhere beyond the ridge in a quiet shelter, a mother would tell her child of the promise that saved them and of the human who kept it without fear.